Okay, so
She
we
gave it
test
to me.
the, there we go,
I know
it's
that.
working, that's good. All right, so last time we were discussing, because we're moving into the promotion part of the discussion on marketing ethics. And this is the area that most people think of as being marketing. There are lots of things that we don't think of as being marketing when we talk about marketing, and I've given you examples of that, such as logistics, and we'll talk about place probably next time. We're gonna finish up talking about promotion this time, and I'm gonna come up with a critical thinking challenge, which may spill over into the last class. But this is clearly the part of marketing that everybody thinks of as being marketing, is advertising. And it's also clearly the one that, with regard to ethics, everybody thinks of as being the most challenging. Although there are lots of ethical challenges in the other P's of marketing: price, place, product. It's clearly in the advertising realm that we see a lot of the ethical issues most, obvious to us in terms of the things that can go wrong, because you are influencing people. And so we started talking last time about combining social styles with vowels, because if you can do this and you get good at it, and we are becoming better and better at this with artificial intelligence, you can make appeals to people that are highly persuasive and maybe volatile of individual autonomy. And the test for that is the will overborne? And so we'll finish talking about these types, and then we'll look at some ads, and we'll think about this, and I'm gonna ask you to get in groups probably and come up with an ad, and then we're gonna talk about whether or not that ad is ethical and whether or not it has the potential to overbear the will and impinge upon individual autonomy. Because the ad is so persuasive that it leads people to maybe make decisions that are not the best in their best interest. And one of the ones that I gave you that we talked about in here, I think I showed you the ad, the Peggy Kessler ad. Did we talk about that? The CTCA ad? Did I show you that ad in here?
You saw the Wrangling Cats ad.
You saw the Wrangling Cats ad, but we didn't look at the CTCA ad. Okay. So we'll finish talking about these combinations of types, and also sort of which type is most likely to go with which social style, and then look at the way we can use these to inform our persuasive techniques. So according to my notes, we had stopped talking about thinkers. We had talked about innovators, is that right? And one of the things that I said, think about these things so that you can get an idea of how to use this. What kinds of restaurants are going to be attractive to these various types? We had started doing that, right? So we talked about innovators last time, and what kind of restaurant would be attractive to innovators. And then we'll think about, like, now that we've got a product, how do we influence them? What's the best way to reach them? And then in your groups, we'll look at ads, and we'll determine whether or not we think the ad is ethical or not, right? So we talked about innovators. We were talking about thinkers. Thinkers have high access to resources. These are people that enjoy traditional intellectual pursuits. And so they tend to view things in terms of a historic perspective. They like to travel. They like to travel for things like looking at history and, going to, for example, to revolutionary battlefields or Civil War battlefields and things like that. That's going to be appealing to thinkers. And I suggested last time, and I believe that you disagreed with me. You didn't think that the Metro was a very good restaurant. You thought it was bland.
I did.
But I suggested that was probably a restaurant that would appeal to this group. It's got if you go into the Metro, aside from the food, the ambiance and the decor is very traditional. It's tastefully done. It's not flashy. It's not, it's all, the appointments are are sort of what you would expect of a really sort of nice country home kind of feel to it, as opposed to some of the more sleek and modern designs that you see in restaurants today. Some of you in here, although I don't see them today, work at Hal Smith Properties like Pub W. Charleston's, I know you work at Charleston's. The original Charleston's is it's on Northwest Expressway. And it's got low ceilings, and they used to have lots, I don't know if they still do, I haven't been in there in a while. They used to have lots of ferns, like in between. And the reason I point this out is because it was sort of that kind of appeal to that kind of person. The modern Charleston's that they have now are much sleeker. If you go into the one on Broadway Extension, for example, you can't have a conversation if it's busy, because the noise is so overwhelming, because it's all this hard surfaces that are really pretty and interesting to look at, but not conducive to keeping down sort of the ambient noise pollution that bounces around the restaurant. So I think thinkers like that kind of restaurant. So the Metro, anybody else think of another restaurant that would be attractive to a thinker?
There's the Hutch, like by Nichols Hills. I went there for my sister's birthday, and it's really quiet. It looks similar to like the Metro.
Okay.
It's just it has little pockets of things.
All right. So it's got that more intimate
Mm-hmm.
feel to it, and it's not
It's
like,
very quiet.
right. If you go again, Charleston's on Broadway, it's loud, and that is attractive to particularly young people who can hear well. I will tell you that when I was in my 20s, I couldn't wait to go out to a loud bar. I thought that was just, like I just couldn't wait. I went out almost every single, I shouldn't tell you this. I mean, I went out almost every single night. I don't know how I graduated, summa cum laude, because I was just like addicted to the party. And now I walk into some of those kinds of environments, and it's like, Jesus Christ, how did I ever, you're having to stand up, you can't hear anything that anybody's saying. I mean, I'm just like horrified. Yes.
Would Paseo Grill be one?
Yeah, I think that's
Because it's
absolutely
more
right. Yes, exactly. Because it's not necessarily more modern. Like, if you think about, like, they have curtains everywhere. I mean, they've got like these tables like walled off in these curtains. It's very like low. The ambient noise level is very, very low in Paseo Grill. So I think that would be attractive to them. On the other end of the spectrum, those that are motivated by ideas but have low access to resources are believers. These are people and why are they motivated by ideals? These are the people that are absolutely going to be found, in church every Sunday. That's those kinds of values. Why are they motivated by ideals? Because they're motivated by these values. Now, it's not to say that thinkers aren't going to be found in church either, because traditionalists have a tendency to go to church. But where you find them in church is going to be maybe different. And if you don't think that there's sort of socioeconomic differences among denominations, there absolutely are. They're absolutely, one of my best friends forever and ever, who is a lawyer, he recently passed away, used to say that Methodists were Baptists with money. You'll find thinkers in places like the Episcopal Church. Why is that you'll find thinkers in places like the Episcopal Church? Anybody ever been to an Episcopal church service? No. None of you's ever been. Nobody's an Episcopal in here?
Can you define it?
Yeah. What is that?
I feel like I've been, but you're using a different word. So
It's
what does
called the
that word
Episcopal
mean?
Church, so the Episcopal Church is, in the United States, is what they would call in the United Kingdom the Church of England. So if we go back again, I'm gonna horrify historians by my very short, shift of modern history. When does modernity begin? It begins in the Quattrocento. And why did it begin in the Quattrocento? Because we see this thinker, Niccolo Bernardo de Machiavelli, who comes up with this idea that we can separate the realm of politics from the realm of religion. Well, in England, Henry VIII decides that he no longer wants to be married to this woman named Catherine of Aragon because she's not producing a male heir, and that was very important for him to have a male heir. And he wants to marry somebody else, this girl named Anne Boleyn, because he thinks he'll have better luck with her. Catherine of Aragon actually did produce a male child, but it was stillborn. And so he wants to get a divorce. At that point in time, England is a Catholic country, and this is the beginning of the Reformation. And so he petitions the Pope for a divorce, and the Pope is not at all amenable to this idea of divorce. So Henry decides he's going to start his own church, and it becomes the Church of England. And he takes away all of the church property in England, and he forms his own church. And basically, the Church of England looks a lot like the Holy Roman Catholic Church and the Holy See, except that instead of having the Pope as the head of the church, Henry decides that he'll be the head of the church. And so to this day, and we're about to witness this transformation of an individual in a coronation ceremony in Great Britain, as Queen Elizabeth II, the longest reigning British monarch, has passed away. Her son is going to take over, and he will become the head of the Church of England, defender of the faith. That church spreads again to like the New World, and it's called the Episcopal, because we're not going to call it the Church of England in the United States. It's going to be called the Episcopal Church, right? So, but it's basically the Church of England. I mean, and the sort of spiritual head of that organization is called the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is kind of like Pope. They would disagree with that, but for simplification purposes. So if you've ever been to an Episcopal service and you've been to a Catholic service, they're going to be very, very similar. The theology of the Holy See, which is the Holy Roman Catholic Church, and the theology of the Episcopal Church are deeply rooted in philosophical ideas of religion. It is enormous amounts of abstraction informed by both the philosophies of Plato and Aristotle through various thinkers like St. Augustine of Hippo, who writes a book called The City of God, and St. Thomas Aquinas, who to this day is still listed as the official doctor of the Holy See. To become a priest in either the Episcopal tradition or the Catholic tradition is pretty much going to require that you go and get a PhD in theology, right? That is very different from some of the Protestant movements. And so you will find thinkers in the Episcopal Church, you will find believers in other denominations that may have less sophisticated theologies. Okay? So you're going to find these people in church. Where are you going to find believers? Well, you're going to find them in a lot of the Protestant religions, that are, you know, have a less abstract idea of God and a more physical manifestation of the deity. So they're motivated by this idea. Thinkers are going to be motivated by sort of like this historical perspective, things like, you know, understanding philosophy. Believers are, you're going to find them in, you know, throughout the South, for example, in a lot of Protestant churches. So what kinds of restaurants do you think are going to be appealing to believers? Given that, you know, their motivation in terms of ideals is not necessarily abstract philosophy. These people have a tendency to believe in right and wrong, and that following those sort of fundamental precepts of right and wrong lead to the good life.
Cracker Barrel.
Absolutely, that's exactly it.
Yeah,
Cracker
like a
Barrel
breakfast
is-
place or like that
Yeah.
stereotypical breakfast.
I
only
think that
place.
is absolutely right. I mean, like, you chose the biggest duck. You said breakfast place, yes. Like, what is Cracker Barrel? Like, you go into Cracker Barrel and it is like, it's an old time country store, right? It appeals to this idea of nostalgia, of going, and there is every kind of knick-knack, bric-a-brac, crap that you, I mean, like, you know, that you have ever seen in the beginning of Cracker Barrel. And the food, you know, I mean, it's,
Hey, those
it-
pancakes are good. Don't even try to knock on them. You're gonna try to knock on them.
You have to be in like the right mood to go to a Cracker Barrel.
Yeah,
Like,
yes.
they didn't like
It's
sit.
the-
Yeah.
it's the only place I've ever had bacon that it was bland.
Okay, well,
I
the
mean-
pancakes are bland.
Okay, yeah, you don't
You're
want
like,
to
I'm
crispy
just-
bacon.
Yeah, you know, I mean, but yes, Cracker Barrel is like the epitome of what these people are gonna, they're gonna, I mean, it appeals to, you know, they've got these rocking chairs on this front porch and this old time feel, and it appeals to nostalgia. And this going back to what is perceived as being a simpler time, right? Like that's when we knew sort of what right and wrong was, and this idea of very certain ways of viewing the world,
So
right?
does that mean
That-
like a lot of baby boomers land in the believers area?
It depends. A lot of baby boomers, for example, like my mother's a boomer. She has a master's degree, she was a teacher, then she went into business and into industry, and she has a lot of access to resources. And she, you know, my mother used to teach comparative religion, and so this sort of idea of understanding the Godhead. When we say, for example, that man is created in the image of God, it's not the Sistine Chapel version of that, right? I mean, the essence of God cannot be understood in terms of physical manifestations. And so, you know, like she's very much a thinker. She's very much going to be like attracted to those kinds of ideas. But you will find, yes, a lot of baby boomers that have now, as they are moving into having limited access, more limited access to resources because they're on a fixed income, as they're retiring, that you're going to find a lot of believers in that group. The interesting thing about some of the older generations is that there is a distinct dichotomy. The largest transfer of wealth, historically speaking, if we went back in time, wealth was produced by those people who could work. And so when you got old, you didn't have a lot of wealth. You relied on, and that's one of the reasons why people relied on big families. You know, you lived on a farm, and when you got older, you couldn't necessarily farm the farm yourself, so you relied on your kids to farm the farm for you and take care of you. when you got old and sick. Now, we've seen a huge transfer of wealth from young to old, but in that transfer of wealth, it has not affected everybody equally, right? And so you have a big portion of these groups of traditionalists, people who are my grandparents' generation and baby boomers who there is no longer necessarily a nice bell curve in terms of the distribution of wealth. It's become a bimodal distribution, right? So you find believers at Cracker Barrel, because this promotes if you go into Cracker Barrel, I remember, going in during 4th of July one year as we were traveling across the country, and it was the only decent place to eat in this little town. And they had everything red, white, and blue. You could get every kind of t-shirt with the American flag, shirts, socks, everything with red, white, and blue. So it's this idea of like patriotism, the flag, all of these things that are going to motivate believers.
I must have special pancakes too.
They have special pancakes during
My
4th
bet.
of July. Yeah, blueberry and
Strawberry.
yeah, great, fantastic.
You know all about their pancakes.
Yeah, you seem to be
Apparently she's a real big fan.
fan of the pancakes, right? So those that are motivated by achievement and have high access to resources are achievers. Did we talk about achievers last time? Did I get to that last time at all?
No.
Okay, so achievers tend to be the first in their family that may have gone to college, and they tend to be professionals. So they tend to be doctors, lawyers, CPAs, things like that. Maybe the first in their family to have gone to college. And so they are motivated by a me first, my family first ideology. They view wealth as a legitimate source of power. In other words, I achieved this. I perceive my wealth as being an expression of the fact that, like I should have both political and social authority, right? It typifies, and I say this, I make merciless fun of Edmond because I grew up in Guthrie. So, Edmond was our big rival at one point in time. Everybody in Edmond, the land of the shallow and pretentious, the gated community. These, and one of my professors in my undergraduate career suggested that, this is not my idea, that Edmond was what was going to be the downfall of the Western world. And by Edmond, he meant the typification of the Edmond lifestyle was going to be the downfall of the Western world. Why is that? Because Edmond is full of gated communities. And the homes that are built in these gated communities say specific things. Like if you drive through them and you look at them, how are they built compared to homes of the past? If you look at homes of the past, they were built with an outward-looking perspective. They had large front porches that are welcoming. What do the homes and gated communities say? They have these massive front doors and no front porch, which basically says what? Like, keep out, right? And the home is built not to the front, but to the back. Everything is done out of view of the community. That nothing goes on in the front lawn, right? So that's achievers. They're motivated by this sense of achievement. I have gone to college, I've become a doctor, I've become a lawyer, I have become a CPA, I have all of this money, and they are highly impacted by a drive to achieve. So they are constantly shuttling their children from activity to activity to activity. If you go to Plano, my brother has 2 kids. He lives in Plano. All of those kids are engaged in 6 or 7 activities constantly. Like my nephew plays lacrosse and soccer and basketball and track, and their entire life is spent shuttling their children from one thing to another. Now, my niece has sort of figured out that if you want to be good at something, if you want to excel, which she's definitely going to be an achiever, you kind of have to limit it to one thing. And so she did all these things. She did gymnastics, and then she did what I refer to as cheernastics, which she just absolutely hated. Which, cheernastics, how many of you have seen the television series called Cheer? Anybody seen that television series? Okay, so Cheer is about the most successful, the first season is all about the most successful cheerleading program in the nation, which is Navarro Junior College, which is in Corsicana, Texas, right outside of Dallas. And it's headed by a woman named Monica Aldaba. And so the first season just follows her. And then the second season, they introduced Trinity Valley Community College, which is only 45 minutes from Navarro. And Trinity beats Navarro in the second season. The rivalry between those two, they've switched off in terms of their wins in the national collegiate cheerleading competition. This is an intense sport. And it's no longer, when I was a kid growing up, cheer was women went to football games and they did pom, and maybe they did some kicks, and they had some catchy little, chants or whatever. That was what cheer was. That is not what cheer is today. Cheer is an intense athletic sport that is highly competitive and highly, and it's no longer just about doing some kicks and some backflips. It is enormously motivated and influenced by gymnastics. So my niece did gymnastics. She did what I call cheernastics, which is the combination of cheer with gymnastics, and she did soccer and basketball. And she's now decided that if she wants to be really good at one thing, it's soccer. And so she's on the elite soccer team, and she's given all the other stuff up. She's going to be a soccer player. But achievers are motivated by this drive to achieve and excel in everything. So what kinds of restaurants do you think are going to be appealing to achievers? And of course, there's some crossover. What do you think they're gonna want to? What?
McNeely's.
McNelly's. Okay.
McNeely's.
McNeely's.
It's McNelly's.
It's McNelly's. You're
Juniors,
talking about in Midtown, right?
juniors,
Like
How
the
do you
steak
say it?
place?
The what?
The steak place? Maybe it's not that.
No, I'm talking
Is it
about
Bricktown?
the Irish pub is
No.
McNelly's.
No, not that one.
Okay, juniors. Why do you say? What is McNeely's? I guess I thought you meant. I was talking about the
Oh, Mickey
Irish pub.
Mantle.
Mickey Mantle.
There
Okay.
you go.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say, my
Okay.
bad.
All right. Mickey Mantle. Why?
Because it's just I feel like only, if you go to the back rooms,
Uh-huh.
you can't really see what's going on over there. You see people waiting on you in suits, stuff like
Okay.
that.
All right. That would definitely be something, because it's gonna showcase wealth, right?
Yeah.
Or your status. You said juniors,
Yeah.
supper club.
Yeah.
Why do you think juniors?
surrounded by other people like you that are successful and
Okay.
Have we
It's
said that
expensive.
yet?
I've
Okay.
been trying
Expensive.
to.
Oh.
Vast, yes. I think Vast is definitely, it's at the top of the largest building in Oklahoma City.
Even the name of it.
It's absolutely a sign,
I went there once and I felt so out of place.
Right.
Isn't juniors kind of like an oil?
Tellers?
Juniors it was big among the oil set. Yeah, it really was. But I think you could find probably that Achievers would something like that. Maybe Juniors as well, because Juniors is more established. Vast is new.
What about
I think-
tellers?
What about
Tellers?
Tellers? Oh, yeah, I think absolutely that would probably be a good one, because that's in the First National Bank building. It's new. What you'll find is that a lot of these, Juniors, probably if we went back to the 1980s, that was definitely an Achievers place, because in the 1980s, it was all about, the bygone oil business. And those were the people that were out there making deals. And now, it's kind of still got that oily, whereas a lot of the population of Oklahoma City has moved on beyond the oil and natural. I mean, it's still an important industry, but we've moved on to a lot of, for example, our medical technology sector in along Lincoln Boulevard is a huge thing. But I think those are all good choices for achievers. Vast is the one that I have historically come up with in the last 5 years because it's at the top of this building. It's very sleek and modern. There was another restaurant that used to be like sort of that. It was called the Petroleum Club. It was at the top of the Chase Tower. Now that's kind of old school, right? And Vast is because it's more modern. The menu is far more modern. It's not traditional. It's experimental in many respects. And so I think that's one of the things that achievers would like. If you have low access to resources, but you're motivated by achievement, this is strivers. Strivers tend to be the center of what's called street culture. So you find a lot of hipsters among the striver population. So what are hipsters and what makes them strivers? So strivers are people who want to become achievers, but find it difficult to make that success. If you went back in time again, in a historic perspective, when my mother went to college, if you went to college, you were pretty well guaranteed that you were going to become middle class. That is no longer true. Like you could get any degree. When my mother graduated from college, she had a degree in English, for God's sake. I mean, can you imagine anything more worthless than a degree in English? And she's achieved a lot of success. She's bought, started, sold, developed multiple businesses over her lifetime. And a lot of it is because she went to college and she learned how to think critically. Now, I would suggest to you that just getting a college degree is not going to be enough to guarantee success. One of the reasons that my mother was successful with an English degree is because she could write and she could communicate well. But that's not going to be enough today. You're going to have to be able to combine that with other things, which are going to make you more successful. A lot of students, I come from this little town in Guthrie, and a lot of our students are not going to college. When I graduated from high school, 50% of the graduating class went to tried college, 50%. That is significantly decreased as college has become more expensive and students no longer see a value. And so, I sit on the city council in this town, and I have a lot of friends that have young children, and these young people ask me, why should I go to college? It's not going to be a guarantee of success. It's not going to be a guarantee that I will achieve middle class status. And my answer to that is, you're right. It is not a guarantee that you will achieve middle class, but I can guarantee you that if you don't go to college, your shot at it is greatly diminished. You may not achieve success by just going to college, but if you don't, it's going to be real. Unless you have something else that you can do, it's going to be really, really hard to do that. Now, there are other ways you can do it. You can become a plumber or an electrician, and those people make a lot of money. In many instances, plumbers and electricians make more money than people who have gone to college. That's because we have to throw in all of those people that have musical theater degrees, and like, I would suggest to you that if you get a degree in musical theater, you're going to be hanging it off, the cappuccino machine at Starbucks. And, that's just reality. So, get a degree in professional sales and, you'll have a greater shot at achieving this. So strivers have a tendency to want to achieve, they want to be achievers, but they find it difficult to do. So they're often the center of street culture. Where do you think strivers in Oklahoma City are going to hang out? What kinds of areas?
Somewhere like the Red Cup.
The Red Cup, yeah. One of my, like hate that place. Absolutely. Like makes my skin crawl, but yes, there's lots of people with interesting facial hair in the Red Cup. And
Pretty much anywhere in the Paseo.
the Paseo, yes, okay, we're gonna, like, the Paseo is gonna be a hotbed of street culture. The Plaza District is another one that's probably gonna be attractive to those people. Now, there are places in Paseo that are probably gonna be, you said Paseo Grill, for example, are gonna be attractive to achievers or maybe even thinkers because the ambiance is different in Paseo Grill, but certainly Oso, you find lots of interesting characters hanging out in Oso. On 23rd Street, so that whole area in there, not just Paseo, but 23rd Street is full of these kinds of places. Gaiutes, how many of you have been to Gaiutes? It's like one of the places I absolutely can't stand, but like one of my favorite bartenders ended up there, so I will go in there to talk to him from time to time. So those places are gonna be, I think, attractive to strivers. The Plaza District, things like that. People who are motivated by self-expression and have high access to resources are called experiencers. These are people who want to engage in thrill and at a very high level. So you'll find people that are experiencers doing things like something I would never do, skydive. I do not understand why anyone would want to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. I say this as a commercial pilot now. People who skydive, you know, I have friends who do this. Their response to me when I say I would never jump out of a perfectly good airplane is, their response is there's no such thing as a perfectly good airplane, right? They've all got problems, but they're gonna be, you know, like when iFly opened up, that's gonna be, they're the first ones to go to something like iFly. They like all kinds of intense, extreme sports and experiences, and they have the money to engage in those kinds of experiences. So what kinds of restaurants are gonna be attractive to experiencers? People who,
Like a hot air balloon dinner.
okay, a hot air balloon dinner. That would definitely be, because it's risky, you're off the ground. You know, I don't know, like, what else? What, in terms of restaurants around?
There's some restaurants out there where you eat completely in the dark.
Oh, yeah, okay, I think
Would
that's,
that be-
yes. We actually did one of those here at UCO. When I used to be, one of my first jobs here at UCO was accommodating students with disabilities. And so one of the things that they did was we did a dining in the dark experience so that people would understand what it was like to be vision impaired. So it was, you know, completely, that we turned off all the lights and shut, you know, as much as we could, made it as dark an experience. But yeah, that's definitely something that it's a challenge. It's not something that you're gonna get every single day.
What about
When
like those Karen diners where they like treat you bad? Like,
Oh,
The Karen diners, yeah, this is a new thing. Actually, it's a new take on an old thing. There used to be a place, and we actually went there one year for my high school prom. Down on Meridian, there was a restaurant called Molly Murphy's House of Fine Repute. And it was this Victorian looking building. And all of the waiters dressed up in costumes, like, you know, and they made fun of you from the minute you walked in the door. You were like subjected to a barrage of, you know, insults and things like that. And it was like a funny experience.
Why did
Was that
you choose to
yours?
go there for prom night?
Yeah.
May I ask?
Was that your idea? Was that your idea?
No, it was not my idea.
Was that your date's
Uh,
idea?
There was a group of us that went, and it was just fun. It was a fun experience. I mean, like the people that I was closest to in high school were not, I mean, it was something that it was different than what everybody else was doing. Everybody else was going to, at that time, we had a restaurant in Guthrie called the Sand Plum. It was Oklahoma's only 4-star restaurant, Mobile Guide 4-star restaurant. And that was where everybody went who, like if you wanted the traditional prom experience where it was, like they had something that you don't see in most restaurants today. So it was, all the waiters wore tuxedos and bow ties, cummerbunds and tuxedo slacks, and they had what were called WAs. So waiters like never actually touched anything. They came and told you about the menu and the specials and things like that. And then the waiter's assistant was the one who did all the work. Actually went and brought all of the food and things like that to you. So if you wanted that traditional kind of experience, that's where everybody went for prom. We wanted that. My friends wanted something different than that. And so we went to Molly Murphy's because it's this sort of disconnection between here you are, you're all dressed up, and now you're being insulted by these people who are in clown costumes. It was an experience. So yeah.
They also have the restaurants where like the table strapped to a crane and like you.
Oh, yes, yes, I think that would definitely be something that experiencers would like, so that you're in this sort of, environment that is highly, or at least the perception is that there's a risk, right? I'm gonna bet, and I've seen one of those in New York City where they do this, where they take, that you dine in this thing. I'm gonna bet you're strapped down to that pretty good. But, if you have a fear of heights, which lots of people do, there's gonna be this perception that is definitely a big experience. So I think those are all ideas that
The Stone Line Inn.
the Stone Line Inn. Our clientele has changed and shifted over the years. I think, I'm gonna give you a duck for it. I think that maybe we appeal to more thinkers now,
Yeah.
because the menu is sort of a traditional fare, which is, it's well done, but I think experiencers they're gonna want the tweezer food kind of stuff.
What about a place like the Starlight Diner in New York City?
I don't know what the Starlight Diner is.
It's a place where.
Apparently I'm not an experiencer.
It's a place where people that are wanting to be on Broadway go and wait, and then they sing songs throughout
Yeah.
it's very acquired.
So their waiters are all talent, who are trying to make it, but realize that they have to wait tables
Yeah,
until they get their big break on Broadway. Is
Yeah.
that it? Okay, that might be it. Yeah.
it's fun until you're waiting on a refill and your
And they're
server
up
is just
doing a
belting.
show tune.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that might be one that experiencers would like.
The one that they throw the rolls at you.
Okay.
Drag show brunch.
Where is that in Branson?
They have one close to Branson.
Yeah, there's one outside of Branson. That one might actually appeal more to makers. So experiencers have high access to resources. Makers have low access to resources. And I'm gonna say this as someone who loves Branson. Branson's not exactly the epitome of highbrow, right? It is definitely,
There is Lambert's.
there's what?
There is Lambert's.
Yeah.
Oh, the throwing rolls, and they're hot when they toss them to you. They're
Yes,
freaking
yeah.
out of the oven.
So makers are motivated by this self-expression. Let me see if I can get the camera to come back. Here we go. Follow. Makers are the ones that, how many of you have been to a Fair of the Heart? Okay, a couple of you. That's where you're gonna find makers. They're gonna be motivated by arts and crafts and things like that. Experiencers are gonna be the ones that are high dive, skydiving, jumping off the cliffs, doing parasailing, stuff like that. You're gonna find makers at a Fair of the Heart, which is, it's very traditional stuff, right? Scrapbooking, things like that. I happened to accidentally book a hotel, an Embassy Suites in Kansas City one year when they were having a scrapbooking convention. And this was in the early ages of social media And these women are running up and down the hall screaming with their scrapbooking tools and like running between each other's rooms and just talking about all of, and I'm like, you know, people, there's a modern phenomenon for this. It's called Facebook. Put your pictures up there and stop like, you know, disturbing my sleep. But yeah, scrapbooking, things like that is gonna be interesting to makers. What kinds of restaurants are gonna be attractive to makers, do you think?
Melting pot?
The melting pot, the fondue?
Yeah.
Okay, I think at one point in time, that probably would have been very attractive to thinkers because fondue was like something that was exotic. You got it in Switzerland, but not so much anymore. It's become far more, you know, déclassé than it used to be. So probably, I think that's right. When I was a kid growing up, hibachi was very new. That was like, and you wouldn't have found just ordinary people at a hibachi because it was really seen as expensive and exotic. They wouldn't, you know, but now they're like, there's a hibachi restaurant on every corner. I think they would like hibachi. Because it's, you know, you're getting somebody to make it in front of you and you're experiencing that.
Do they like to just hunt and get their own food?
Absolutely, yeah. This is the group that you will find the largest number of outdoor enthusiasts in that group.
What
What?
about there's like these places where you can go like make your own pancakes in front of you and like.
Okay, sure, yeah, absolutely, because that would be entertaining, right? So I think that would probably be another one that would be appealing to makers.
What about Bark?
What's that?
It's like a new concept downtown, and you can bring your dog outdoors and you can order food and drinks.
Oh,
Okay.
like Red Solo Pup, kind of like that.
Yeah, it's somewhere down where like the Oklahoma River is at,
Okay,
so it's new.
What about
What about-
hot pot?
what's that?
Hot pot or like the Korean barbecue?
The Korean bar, okay, yeah. I think those are probably all interesting to makers. At the bottom, so when we look at the top, high access to resources, but doesn't clearly fit into any one of these three things is innovators, right? Because innovators are oftentimes motivated by various different things. They may be motivated by ideals, achievement, and self-expression all at the same time. At the bottom, those that don't fit into any of these clearly defined things are survivors. Survivors are the least likely to have a computer, the most likely to still have a landline. And I used to ask my students, you know, I stopped asking this question about 5 years ago, how many of you still have a landline? And inevitably there would be like one or two, you still have a landline. And the reason they still had a landline was not because they actually used it, it was because they had an alarm system.
Yep.
And you have to have a landline for the alarm system. You no longer have to have a landline for an alarm system. The alarm systems, they can put on a cellular network. And so,
My mom still has a landline, like a home phone,
yeah,
that we don't have an alarm system. She just uses it and loves it.
she loves her landline.
She does not like her iPhone really, so every time she prefers people to call the home phone than her cell phone.
That would scare the shit out of me.
Yeah.
I-
So like
I
whenever giving out
actually-
phone number for like rewards programs, no one knows her cell phone number. It's all the home phone. So that she can get texts, can't get calls randomly. And she even has it set up now where it will stop ringing after the first ring if it's a spam call. She has
Really?
programmed her landline to stop for spam calls.
Wow.
Yeah, she loves her
You
landline.
can,
I feel
you
like.
can, you can do that. You can do it where if it doesn't come up on a caller ID, it will block it.
Yep,
So
like it will go through
makes me
to
feel
voicemail, but it'll just stop ringing throughout the house.
how many of you, I think
Sandwich?
the Google phones like now have a feature where if it thinks it's spam, it will say, haven't you
Spam.
experienced this? Like you don't make phone calls. So one of my friends he has a Google phone and I called him from UCO's because I left my phone in the car. I called him from UCO because it's a landline, UCO's phone, and it said, this caller does not accept calls from unknown
Oh.
unknown numbers. You can leave a message and you start talking and it will send him a text with what you're saying and he can choose whether or not to, how many of you have done that? Okay, so, yeah, you know, survivors, like this is all technology that they're not gonna have. They're the most likely to still rely on some kind of signal for their television. They get the least amount of channels. Somebody said in my class, we were talking about this in my IMC class a little while ago, they said they're the most likely to watch Fox News. A lot of them can't even watch Fox News because Fox News is cable. You don't get Fox News, you know, you get 4, 5, 9 and PBS. So these are the ones that are the most likely to still have a landline, have no access to computers, maybe never touched a computer. I know that it's hard to imagine in this day and age that you could survive without a computer, right? How do you get your groceries? They don't actually magically appear. They actually have to go and get their groceries. What restaurants, now this one I think is really obvious, are gonna be attractive to survivors? Brahms. Okay, and who said McDonald's? Yes, Brahms. Why?
I don't know, it's reliable.
It's cheap, it's reliable. I mean, like, it is not, you said McDonald's, didn't you? Yes. McDonald's is definitely, like, gonna be extraordinarily attractive to these people. Why? You can eat at McDonald's for almost nothing. How many of you have seen a show, a documentary, called Food Inc.? Okay. So you watch the show, and one of the people that they highlight in the show is this family that they realize that the food that they're eating is killing them. But there's not much that they can do about it because they have one car, they have 2 kids, and they have to get everybody to where they need to go. They've got 2 children in different grades, at different schools, and a husband and wife that both have to work one vehicle. Where's the one place you can go and feed everybody quickly and get to where everybody needs to go? It's McDonald's, right? Because you can go through McDonald's drive-through and you can feed everybody you can feed a family. This is incredible, for less than $10, by getting the sausage McMuffin without the egg. It's incredible to me that egg. So you can get a sausage McMuffin if you get the 2 for $2, or 2 for $2.50. You're getting a sausage McMuffin for $1.25, and you can get a drink for $1.
For McChicken.
You can get, you can get the entire family for not a lot of money. And that's what these people are gonna be attracted to is stuff that is a good value or perceived good value.
What about like
And-
Little Caesars?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's what, like,
No
You can
longer
buy-
$5.
it's no longer $5, but it's pretty cheap. Now, how do we combine these with social styles? So let's think about this. Innovators, what do you think would be the dominant social style of an innovator? Driver. Yeah, I think you're gonna find these people are busy, they're thinking about stuff, they're gonna be drivers. Thinkers, I think this one is really easy. This is a low bar. What do you think? Analytical. Yeah, I think that's right. At least I'm just gonna start tossing the ducks. I've only put one student's eye out by I'm just kidding. By tossing the ducks. So what about achievers? What do you think that they're?
Can I ask you a question about survivors real quick?
Yeah.
So with the survivor, the person I was thinking of when you started describing him was like an older person that is sitting on a large sum of money that's too afraid to use it. So does that fit into survivors, or is it only lower income?
Okay, so one of the things, when we talk about these and when we talk about social sciences, one of the things that makes it difficult is that it's not necessarily easy to pigeonhole people based on just one characteristic, right? So a lot of times people will say things to me like, well, particularly people over in the hard sciences, they'll say things like, well, marketing isn't rocket science. You're right, marketing isn't rocket science. It's harder than rocket science. Why is it harder than rocket science? Rocket science, we know, we watched the Elon Musk's SpaceX, is he the one that did SpaceX? Is it SpaceX?
Yeah.
We watched his like SpaceX rocket blow up in a big way the other day. And they were talking about, of course, because Elon has to spin everything positively, like that's a huge win. Rocket science operates within very well-defined rules of physics.
Yeah.
And when things like that go wrong, we can figure out precisely why it went wrong, right? When we talk about marketing, marketing's a lot harder than rocket science because there are literally thousands of things that may motivate us.
Yeah.
Right? We can't just pigeonhole it. And actually, if you look at the math behind some of the marketing studies, when we do structural equational modeling, the math gets far more complex than you even see the math. Like, okay, I've got this friend who's poor, slow-headed little Joe, has a PhD in biology. And, you know, like the maths that they use are very simplistic. I mean, you're looking at analysis of variance, which is just, you know, I mean, it's just whether or not there's differences. I mean, that's really easy math to calculate. When you talk about structural equational modeling, where you have literally thousands of inputs into a model to look at whether or not people are motivated or things like that, the math gets really, really spooky. So it's not rocket science. It's a lot harder than rocket science. So what you're highlighting here is a phenomenon that you have a lot of people who actually, and I can give you an example of this, a client that I had in Guthrie, she literally had one light bulb at a time. And she would go from room to, she would unscrew the light bulb and go and screw it in to another room. And she lived in this little house, you know,
In a one bedroom.
no, it was not a one bedroom type thing. It was the house that she'd lived in forever and ever and ever. And it was like literally falling down around her. But she had inherited a bunch of mineral rights from her family. They had sold off the family farm and moved into town years ago. But somebody in that family, it was her great granddaddy, had the mother with to keep all of the mineral rights when they sold off the surface. And she had all of these mineral rights. And so, yeah, she acted like a survivor, even though technically she had high access to resources. But again, some of this is whether or not you have the perception that you have high access to resources. Her perception was at any moment, because she had lived through the Depression,
Yes.
you could go broke. And the fact that she had like literally $5 million sitting in T-bills was not comforting to her. So, I mean, there's, you know, there's a perception. So technically, she has high access to resources, but yes, she didn't go out to eat
Yeah.
because that was a frivolity. Like, you know, you could make that at home
You can,
for far less. And you can,
you can.
right? I mean, you can make it at home for far, so yeah, she was definitely, I mean, her mentality was that of a survivor, even though technically she had, you know, enough resources to be, you know, far higher on the typology. So where were we? So thinkers, we said were analyticals, right? And you said that wasn't worth the duck, but okay. Achievers, where do you think achievers are?
Expressive.
You think they're expressive?
Maybe driver.
Okay. I think they could be expressive, but I think they're probably also drivers because they have a me first attitude. But you can see that they're gonna be expressives in that group. But I think probably likely you're gonna have, and again, when you talk about characteristics of the aggregate in these groups, you can't apply characteristics of the aggregate to individuals or individuals characteristics of the individuals to the aggregate. Experiencers, what Those are expressive, okay, all right, I think that's correct. Because they are gonna be like very dramatic and theatrical. Believers, what social style do you think?
Amiable.
You think believers are gonna be analytical?
Amiable.
Amiable.
Cause they're
Okay.
loyal.
I can see either of those, they can be amiable. I'm running out of ducks, gonna have to catch.
You can take some of my duck.
I think you can also find believers that are probably analytical, to the, you know, in a different sense. I mean, there's, again, we can talk about higher order rationality and lower order rationality, so yes, I think to the extent that you can have lower order rationality. I think among thinkers, again, and did I talked about churches in here, right? Like,
Yeah.
right, so, yeah, I guess. Strivers, where do you think, so
Yeah, driver.
you think they're gonna be drivers? Okay, why?
Because they're still focused on like achievement, it's still in the achievement category. So they're trying, I would assume there's still some type of self-centered, not self-centered, but care about themselves.
Right, okay, yeah. Makers, what? Amiables? Okay, why do you think amiable? You get the last duck. I'm out of ducks. Why do you think amiable?
Participation goes down.
Alright, I think you can find expressives in the makers because they like to do it, but again, you can find, I think, lots of amiables. What about survivors?
Expressive.
I don't think they're expressive.
I feel like they're analytical because they have to think about surviving.
Okay, you're gonna get a pen instead of a duck. I think survivors are the most likely to be amiable
Really?
because they have to get, I mean, it's just, you know, you have to get along. And so you have to sort of,
You're saying that strivers or survivors?
survivors.
Yeah, I didn't get
Survivors
that.
are-
I
I
thought they're
think-
blinded by their like feelings that they can't get the right perception. Like
Yeah, I mean, I think
majority
they are the most likely to be amiables because it's just, you know, it's just trying to make it through the day. And the way you make it through the day is by being nice, right? But you could certainly find examples of people that are not. Old people have a tendency to be crotchety, you know, if they don't feel well. So you might find that they have a secondary social style that's less. So what I want you to do, and I'm gonna give you the rest of the class time to do this, and then next time I want you to send me links on D2L. I will open up a Dropbox for ads. I want you to get into groups at your tables. If you only have one at your table, you're gonna have to move of 3 or 4 and come up with an ad that you think is great. And tell us why you think it's great, what makes the ad great, and then what ethical issues you find associated with the ad.
You want us to come
So-
up with an ad or?
No, find an ad.
Okay.
So come up with an ad, like not develop an ad, but
Why you
But
think
they're
that's great.
search the web to come up with an ad that you think is
And
great.
ethical problems.
Send me a YouTube or some kind of video of the ad and we'll watch it and you'll tell us why you think it's great and what ethical, and then what type of person you think it's appealing to in terms of the Val's style. And so I'll give you the rest of the class to do this and I'll give you some time at the beginning of next hour to finish it up and then we'll look at the ads and see which ones you think are the best and why you think they're the best. So do that and I will.
Is this taking place of the critical thinking essay thing or no?
This is a bonus critical thinking,
Okay, cool. So
so.
we still have the essay due on the second.
So you want us, will you give us the
Yeah, he's a
parameters of what you want us to explain one more time?
So I want you to find an ad.
I didn't know.
So you're gonna find an ad that you think is great. That's a video ad, right? So like the CTCA, and I didn't share all the CTCA ad. Alright, I'll give you some class time. I'll show you this is an ad that I think is a really good ad.
Not sure.
I think it's got lots of ethical issues with this ad.
I thought the critical thinking challenges were all bonus.
They are,
Okay.
because I ran out of time and I think I said that.
So an ad we think is great, ethical dilemmas, and then what type of category it attracts.
Let's see if I can find it. Yes. Yeah. Let me see if I can find it.
Let's do this.
I didn't make you all watch this. I thought I had you.
Not that one.
It was like just on. Commercial, and I was like.
We watched a different ad that was pretty bad.
You're the one butter. Yeah, he like hates it. Why? That's why he doesn't understand. Because he doesn't, he's impatient, he doesn't like waiting.
We didn't watch this ad in here. I thought we did.
It's insane. I know.
So I think that's an exceptionally good ad. I think it's also an exceptionally ethically problematic ad. What?
Why?
Why is it an exceptionally problematic, ethically problematic ad? Because it has the ability to overbear the will with regard to a vulnerable population. So when we talk about issues of autonomy, what we're looking at is the decision a product of free will, or is the will overborne? So what are the products of free will? The products of free will are that it is knowing, right? That the decision is knowing, it is voluntary, and it is intelligent. Knowing is a very easy threshold, like the person is not in a coma, right? They are aware of their surroundings. That's the easiest. This is what we call an elements test. It's a hard test. So are you conscious? Are you making the decision of a knowing state? Is it voluntary? Well, when I used to teach criminal law and procedure, for example, there's lots of cases in criminal law where you're knowing, is it voluntary? If I sit there and I for example, in an interrogation, this is the hypothetical of the prisoner's dilemma. In an interrogation, if I sit there with the phone book or the rubber hose and say, did you shoot Joe? And you say no, and I hit you upside the head with the phone book. You know why you use a phone book? You all have never seen a phone book. There used to be these things that people used to go to when they wanted to find out what the number for a business was, called the Yellow Pages, and they were huge and they were thick. And the police in the olden times, or not so olden times, would take this and you'd say, no, I didn't kill Joe. Whap! Right upside the back of the head. you know, pretty soon, you got a headache, but guess what? It didn't leave a mark. Didn't leave a bruise.
You really didn't have to mark?
No.
Huh?
No, if I hit you, there's no mark. You know, right? So, you know, like, is it voluntary? Well, how do we tell if something, obviously, if I'm hitting you upside the head with a phone book, there's a lot of evidence that it's not voluntary, even though there's no mark, right? But there are other things that we can do to overbear the will, a lot of psychological tactics that we can use, and in ads like the CTCA ad, we do, right? I mean, like this isn't really voluntary. If you are, the textbook suggests, and something that I disagree with, is that autonomy is not something you have 1 minute and not the next, and I think that's completely wrong. I think depending on the context, you can have a lot of autonomy and maybe not so much autonomy the next minute, because it's, you know, if you're facing cancer, this decision is enormously frightening, right? So is the will overborne? Is it knowing? Are you conscious? Is it voluntary? Then the third prong becomes even more difficult. Is it intelligent? Right? What constitutes an intelligent decision making? If you don't have these three things, and ads can overbear. Hard to, the first prong is easy, you know, it's hard for the ad, although we've maybe got ways of influencing you subliminally, I don't know, they used to think that. So that's easy, but whether or not it's voluntary and intelligent are critical. And I think ads like the CTCA ad have the ability to overbear your voluntariness. If you are facing cancer and you're being told, for example, Peggy had pancreatic cancer, if you are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, you're probably going to die. And would you grasp at straws? You know, most people cling to life. So is that is it a voluntary and is it an intelligent decision? I'm not sure that it is, right? So find an ad, and I'll give you some time in class at the beginning of the class next time to finish this up because we're out of time. So I'll give you like 30 minutes at the beginning to come up with that, and then we'll look at your ads and determine whether or not it's voluntary. I have gotten some grading done. I got the second exam graded, if you haven't seen that. If you want to know why you got a certain grade on the essay, you can open up the attempt and go down to the bottom, and then you have to click on expand feedback, right? All right, so I will see you guys next Tuesday, and that's our last class.
So just to confirm, the critical thinkings are bonus.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I think I remember I said that.
So is this thing we're working on, is this the group introduction?
No, I'll open a Dropbox for you.
Okay.
Put it in.
What's the group introduction?
We did that individually
Okay.
because I stopped doing the groups when we started having COVID
Okay.
and it was an issue.
Oh, I remember doing that. Okay.
All right, hold on, I gotta get ducks, let me stop the recording and I will get how many ducks you got.
How do you get that many?
Just answering questions.